Hello. Okay. All right. Hello? Yes, it's there. Welcome, everybody online. I'm Lisa. I'm your co-host for tonight. Linda, I'm the host, and Linda is right here beside me to save me when something goes wrong. So welcome, everyone, to the Kadampa. Good to see everyone. Happy New Year. If you're here tonight or you're on Zoom, then we're off to a great start. Thank you for participating. All right, we're waiting on Robbie. He should be here any minute. Stay tuned.
Oops.
Okay, Robbie has arrived. He's getting ready. We'll be starting
Dropping
here in
things.
just a minute.
Okay. Doesn't sound too weird, does it? Okay, great. Let's see. I've got 6:57 here. Is that accurate? Anybody? Okay, let's wait a minute. In case anybody gets in at the very last moment. Okay.
I might need your help.
Well, will you let me do it, or are you going to be watching over my shoulder?
Right now, we're able to.
A little domestic discussion. Okay, great. Good evening, everyone. This is the beginning of the, I don't know how many times we've gone through this cycle. A lot. Probably at least 10 times, I would think. Did you have an answer, Chris? Oh, really? Yeah. No, yeah. This Discovering Buddhism series. This is a series of 13 modules, and we're going to complete it in 2 years, more or less, okay?
Probably less than 2 years.
Okay.
But there'll be some breaks due to retreats and things like that that we'll be holding.
Yeah, and I think we've shortened a number of the modules. Most of them are going to be 4 weeks. We felt some of them were a little bit stretched out, so we think we can cover the important material in 4 weeks for each module. It would be perfect to take them all in sequence, but you can, if you have obligations skipping a module, you can certainly start in with the next one. So tonight, this module for the next 4 weeks is Mind and Its Potential. And I say this about all the modules, but I really think this is my favorite one to teach because it is really the absolute basis for everything that you'll study if you continue your studies in Buddhism and particularly in the Tibetan tradition. So just so we can introduce ourselves, my name's Robbie Watkins. I've been coming to Kadampa Center for 30 years about. I am not one of the founders. Some people think I may, but I have been coming since fairly soon after it was founded, and I've been teaching various modules in the Discovering Buddhism series since we started offering it here. Let's see, do we have anyone who's here for the very first time tonight? 1, 2, okay. First time at Kadampa Center. Okay, first time discovering, but first time at Kadampa Center? Okay, this is perfect way to start. Not that I'm the best teacher, but the material is really the ground on which everything else will be based. Do we have anyone who's taken this module before? Okay, we have a number, we have people who are brand new and then people who have taken the module before and then some people that are in between. Okay. Let's see. Were we going to show the video tonight? I don't, yeah, that's okay. I wasn't counting on it. We may show it next week, but yeah, okay. So we're dealing with, it's always a question whether Buddhism is actually a religion or not. And His Holiness the Dalai Lama has referred to it as a mind science. So the first module is discovering what he means and what the Buddha means when he talks about mind. Okay, the Buddha's point of view is definitely non-theistic. Okay, there is no God, no all-powerful creator in the Buddhist view of the world. Okay, it's a non-theistic philosophy or religion, if you want to call it that. So if there's no God, what is there? And the Buddha said, if you look carefully, you'll find that you have a body, your physical being, and a mind, or consciousness, or awareness, which is the non-physical aspect of your being. So each of us as an individual is a combination of one body and one mind, and that's who we are. And that's all we are, according to the Buddhist point of view. There is no eternal soul, okay? And that Buddhism is really fairly unique among the world's major religious traditions in that there is both no God and no soul in the Buddhist tradition, in the Buddhist teachings. There's just a mind, a body, and a mind, okay? So, what that means is it's all up to ourselves. There's no one else who can do anything for us in terms of fixing our problems, giving us salvation, leading us, or taking us to a special place. It's up to our mind and our body to do that, okay? And everything that we talk about when we're studying Buddhism is based on the mind, okay? Everything that goes on here at Kadampa Center is about developing our mind. And, you can come in and you can see all this stuff around on the walls, and you can hear people chanting in Tibetan and doing certain mudras with their hands, and incense, and there's ringing of bells, but no matter how strange or unusual it seems, or how complicated the teachings are, if you always remember, this is to develop my mind. Everything in the Buddhist tradition is about developing our mind, ultimately developing its qualities of compassion, which is the wish that others be free of suffering, and then its qualities of wisdom, which means seeing reality without preconceptions or distortions. So we want to develop our qualities of compassion and our qualities of wisdom. And everything that we do at Kadampa Center and everything that the Buddha taught is for that end, to develop your qualities of compassion and wisdom. And when they're completely developed to their utmost degree, which is a possibility for all of us, it's said that we are ourselves enlightened, or a Buddha, an enlightened being, someone who has completely developed that. And it all happens in your mind, that non-physical aspect of your being. It's not something that you do with your body. It's not something that you get from someone else. It's something that you do yourself by working on your mind. Okay? For most of us, that seems far-fetched, to say the least, okay? But we'll talk about how the Buddhist view of the mind makes that very possible for every living being. It's actually possible, for a cockroach to become enlightened. Very difficult, okay, to develop those qualities, but it's a possibility because, according to the teachings of the Buddha, they have a mind also that's very similar to our mind, okay? So we're talking about developing our mind, and everything in the modules to come is going to be about that, about develop. It's either going to be, generally most modules will either be in the wisdom category, seeing reality, which means talking about the inevitability of death, how precious the human life is, about karma, okay? Those are, according to the Buddha, those are aspects of reality we need to become familiar with, or about developing compassion, okay, what we refer to as bodhicitta frequently. And as the Buddha said when he taught, and when we get up here and lead these discussions, everything is to be taken and tested against your own experience. The attitude that you bring to the teachings of the Buddha is said to be like an alchemist or an analyst who's looking for analyzing a stone to see what's actually in it. And the teachings are not to be taken on blind faith or just accepted verbatim or swallowed, but to be taken and tested against your own experience. And you say, this seems true, this I don't know, this I really don't know, or this doesn't seem true, and it's perfectly okay to set aside the ones that don't sit well with you, okay? And work with those ones that jive with your experience of reality, your experience of life, okay? So just to give you that's a little bit what we'll be talking about over the next few weeks. So we have to define what the Buddha was talking about when he talked about mind and body, okay? When he said that your mind and body together temporarily, but nothing more than that. I think we're quite familiar with what he means by body. It's all the physical aspects of our being, including the brain, okay? The brain is physical. It is not the mind or the consciousness. When we talk about mind, And again, I'll use the words interchangeably for mind, consciousness. Sometimes we'll say awareness or perception, but we're talking about that non-physical aspect of our being. Okay? So we're all familiar with our mind, but we don't really, typically, and we don't take a lot of time to try and look at it. It's kind of like the fish swimming in the water. The fish doesn't see the water, and we don't see our mind. It seems so much of just who we are. Okay, so we have to really think about what we're talking here, that non-physical aspect that is always present, even when we're sleeping, of our being. Okay, it's related to the brain, it's related to the nervous system, but it's not the same. And this is the whole question of consciousness that Western neuroscience is really starting to get involved with quite heavily now, exactly what it is and how is it distinct or how is it identical with the brain. And the Buddhist point of view is that it's not the brain. It's dependent upon the brain, it's connected to the brain, but consciousness is completely non-physical. Okay? So the Buddha said there were a couple characteristics of mind that we should be aware of, and I've discussed the first one. It's non-physical. It's the non-physical aspect of our brain, of our being, and the Buddha didn't divide it into mind, and there's no division into mind and heart. Okay, it's all consciousness. Emotions are in the consciousness in the same way that 2 + 2 is in the consciousness. Okay, those are all non-physical aspects of our being. Emotions, memories, planning, making a list, having a scratch, having an itch somewhere. These are all phenomena in the consciousness, but they are non-physical aspects of our being. They all occur in that place that we call consciousness. Okay, so the first aspect of our mind is that it's completely non-physical. It cannot be found on even the most acute dissection, okay? You can't find it anywhere in the physical body because it is not the physical body. So it's completely non-physical, something we all have an experience of, but something we don't necessarily look at that closely. So that's the first characteristic of mind, according to the Buddha. It's non-physical. The second is that it's without beginning and without end. If we look at our consciousness right now, we can find a previous moment of consciousness, then we'll get to some point either earlier this morning or during the night when we were asleep, where we can't trace our consciousness, but we know that our mind didn't go out of existence while we were asleep last night. You can trace it back to yesterday, last year, to your childhood, and according to the Buddha, before birth, this physical body, into previous lifetimes, okay? The physical body is temporary. It's just comes together when the sperm and egg join, lasts for 84 years, changes a lot, then dies and goes out of existence, falls apart into its various parts. So it's really a bunch of parts coming together temporarily and then falling apart. That's the physical body. The consciousness, the non-physical aspect, according to the Buddha, there is no first moment of consciousness. You can trace it back through previous lifetimes and keep going. You cannot find a beginning. Okay, so this consciousness, this non-physical aspect of our being, we cannot find a first moment of that consciousness, according to the Buddha. It has been in existence since beginningless time. And in the same way, when our body decays, when we die, that means the body ceases to function and falls apart. The consciousness does not end there, but continues on into the future and will be in temporary union with other physical forms, okay, over and over and over again, without end. No beginning, no end to the non-physical aspect of our being, okay? The physical aspect definitely comes together and falls apart. It's impermanent, okay? The consciousness also is impermanent, meaning it's always changing, but it never reaches an end. It never goes out of existence, okay? And it never came into existence. There's always a previous moment of consciousness. If we want to look at it from a karmic point of view, consciousness, being a non-physical phenomena, can only be produced by a non-physical phenomena, okay? Body, a physical object, cannot create the karmic causes for a non-physical object. They're so utterly different in their being that it makes sense that consciousness always comes from previous moments of consciousness. It doesn't arise from some physical occurrence when the egg and sperm come together. That, according to the Buddha, does not create consciousness. I'm not sure what Western science is saying right now as to when consciousness begins, but according to the Buddha, the consciousness was there before the egg and sperm came together to create the physical body. So that's the second characteristic of mind, as the Buddha defined it, that our consciousness is without beginning and without end, okay? The third characteristic of the mind, as described by the Buddha, says that the mind, there are a lot of ways of saying this, saying that the mind is its nature is like clear light, or it's like a perfectly empty sky with no clouds in it. Okay, all those things we think of as who we are. I'm smart. I'm depressed. I'm an angry person. I'm a jealous person. I'm a friendly person. All those things that we think who we are and that we think are fixed, are part of our basic existence, according to the Buddha, those are just adventitious, so to way. They are not the ultimate nature of our mind. They are thoughts or experiences in that mind, in the same way that clouds pass through a perfectly clear sky. And some of those thoughts are pretty omnipresent. They're there over and over and over again. And that's because, according to the Buddha, if we think an angry thought, that creates the cause to think an angry thought again, and create an angry thought again and again. So there's certain habits, we talked about this on Sunday morning, those things that we think are always there are just mental habits that we've developed over time. And this is what Venerable Rabino, one of our visiting teachers, says, and the Buddha himself says it, that Buddhism is really just about developing different mental habits, getting rid of the ones that don't work. Being angry and jealous and pissed off generally don't work, and replacing those with habits such as compassion, patience, love, that work better, okay? And we can do that because the ultimate nature of the mind is clear, empty space. Okay, we can almost say it's a, I don't know if this word is actually correct, but we could think of it, you can think of it as an empty space, a vacuity. in that it lacks any permanent qualities such as we think. So this is, that might sound weird to people, but it's actually a very optimistic way of looking at things. The Buddha is saying you're not stuck with anything in your mind that doesn't work for you. Okay, it may be very hard to get rid of. It's not something that you can do overnight necessarily, but all those thoughts that you don't like, they are not fixed. They are not something you're stuck with. You can get rid of those and replace them with other thoughts. Okay? So the mind is in the nature of clear light, an empty sky, perfectly clear water. Okay, they give an image they give is, some muddy water or some water with sand in it. And you shake it up, it looks like the sand and the water are one. But if you let it sit and settle, you can see that the water is perfectly clear and the sand is separate, is not part of the water. So we can think of our mind in that way. Okay, so 3 characteristics of mind, according to the Buddha. Completely non-physical, without beginning and without end, continuous. There are no gaps in it, even when we're asleep, even when we go from one lifetime to the next. If you accept that, consciousness continues in both directions. And its nature is in the nature of clear light. Okay? So that's what we're going to be talking about in this module. Any questions or comments on what I've said? And wait for the microphone.
Yeah, since we do have folks joining us online, we just use microphones so that they can hear as well. So if you have anything to share or a question, just raise your hand and I'll bring the microphone to you. And if you're online, you can just get Lisa's attention, raise your hand, or unmute and ask your question. Anyone? Not yet? Anyone online?
Okay. So next thing I'm going to do is introduce the idea of meditation. Okay. Anybody here never meditated before? Everybody has a little bit of experience. Some people have a lot. Okay. I'll talk for those people who have less experience or introduce you to how we do it in the Tibetan tradition. Meditation, anybody, I'm sure someone knows what the actual definition of meditation is in Buddhism. What does meditation mean?
Anyone? To become familiar?
Yes, to become familiar with something. Okay, it's not spacing out. It's not going blank. Our consciousness is still there. So it's not like we go mind dead or anything. At least in the Tibetan tradition, we refer to it as becoming familiar with. Becoming familiar with our own mind, becoming familiar with what's going on in our mind, becoming familiar with the habits that we've developed, becoming familiar with the habits that we'd like to develop. Okay, so it's not spacing out or going brain dead or anything. It's actually a very focused kind of mental activity. And it's done with the mind, that non-physical aspect of our being. But it's said that it's good to have we also have the physical body that we have to deal with. We can't during this meditation. So there's a traditional posture that I'd like to introduce that we use in this tradition. And it's appropriate if you're sitting on a cushion or in a chair. First aspect of the posture is your back's going to be a little bit straighter than you normally sit. You're not going to be slumped over or leaning back. Not rigid, but a little bit straighter than you normally sit. Your head is maybe just a couple degrees in front of the vertical, but not tilted to one side or the other, not chin on chest, so that there's kind of nice line down through your entire spinal column. And your eyes can either be just slightly open so that a little bit of light comes in, or very lightly closed. Either one's fine. Your mouth is lightly closed, your jaws aren't clenched. Your tongue is on your hard palate behind your upper teeth. That's so you don't drool while you're meditating. That's considered bad form. Your shoulders are down, not up around your ears, but relaxed and a little bit back so that your chest is open. It's said that this opens up the energy channels, which are this non-physical, part of the non-physical aspect of our being that the mind rides on, but that's a whole another kettle of fish we're not going to get into. And your upper arms are a little bit away from your torso. Hands in your lap with thumbs touching. And if you're sitting in a chair, you have your feet flat on the floor, and if you want to put them on a cushion, that's perfectly okay. But you're not leaning back in the chair, you're sitting a little straight. And if you're on a cushion on the floor, you're towards the front third or so of the cushion so that you're not back. And so your hips opened up and your legs are in a position that you find stable. And the point of the posture is not to torture yourself, but to establish a solid, stable posture that to a large degree maintains itself once you've started the meditation, so you're not having to pay attention to it over and over. So take just a minute or two, a second or two, and scan your body from the head on down and identify any sources of tension or discomfort that are there now, and address them so they don't become a recurring theme of the meditation. And begin your meditation by taking 3 slow, deep breaths from the abdomen. So the stomach expands on the in-breath and contracts towards your spine on the out-breath. And now we allow our breathing to return to its normal pattern. And we always begin our meditation sessions by setting our motivation, our reason for doing this. And any motivation is fine. If it's just curiosity, that's great. If you're going to do it because you find it relaxing, that's fine. But said that the most powerful motivation is what's referred to as the bodhicitta motivation. which is defined as the wish to become enlightened, to completely develop my qualities of compassion and wisdom so that I can be of benefit to others. Okay, so there's two aspects to it. The wish to become enlightened so I can help others. And that's not necessarily a normal way for us to think. But just for a moment, even if you have to kind of grit your teeth and force it out, think about the bodhicitta motivation. And having set our motivation, we'll begin the actual meditation. And this is just going to be a simple concentration meditation. We're becoming familiar with our mind's ability to concentrate. So the chosen object of concentration is the physical sensation of the breath moving in and out through our nostrils. Just a very simple tactile sensation of air moving in and out through the nostrils. And we place our mind on that direct perception of the movement of the air. We're not describing it to ourselves. We're not visualizing it. Just direct perception of the movement of the air. And every time we notice that our concentration has wandered off to something else, as will inevitably happen, to a memory of something that happened today, or a plan of something we need to do this evening, we set that aside and come back to the breath over and over again. And just as we begin our meditations by setting our motivation, we end them by doing what we call a dedication. We acknowledge that we've done something a little bit out of the ordinary. We've made some effort, and we've planted an imprint on our consciousness. And we think, may that positive energy not be dissipated, but may it ripen in the future in a way that benefits all living beings. And you can relax your concentration. So that's a very simple, but not necessarily easy concentration meditation. And it's something that you can train your mind in. It doesn't come perfectly the first time, but with time it does become easier and you become better at it. So we think of meditation in several main types. There's concentration meditation, where we focus on a single object, such as the breath, or it may be an image of an enlightened being, or it may just be a mental quality like compassion. And then we also do what are called analytic meditations, which is really more a very concentrated type of thinking and analysis about how I'm going to die, how it's inevitable that I die. What does that mean? How do I react to that? How do I make that a part of my existence, that awareness? So we'll be doing both in this and the other modules, concentration meditations and analytic meditations. And there's a subgroup of analytic meditations that are called review meditations, where we just kind of go over the points of an outline just to fix them in our mind. But it's said that these topics in Buddhism we should approach by study, which means hearing them in a situation like this, or reading. So by study, by contemplation, which means thinking about them as we go about our daily activities, and then by meditation. Those are the three ways that we can come to understand what the Buddha was saying. And the Buddha was just an ordinary human being who sat down under the Bodhi tree and looked at his mind and completely developed his qualities of wisdom and compassion and became enlightened. And he said that is a possibility for everyone. And again, it comes down to just working with your mind. Okay, there's no one who's going to do it for you. Certainly you can have spiritual friends, but there's no one who's going to save you or rescue you from your problems besides yourself. So it behooves us to first become familiar with the mind and what it is. Can a Buddha save us from all our problems? Does an enlightened being have that quality, capacity? No, he would if he could, or she would if she could, but that's not a possibility. What can a Buddha, an enlightened being, do? They can teach, okay? They can be an example that we can take advantage of if we choose to. But that's all that a Buddha can do. A Buddha cannot remove problems from your mind stream. A Buddha can teach you how to do it, but it's up to you to follow the advice of the Buddha if you find it reliable. Okay? And again, I wanted to emphasize how it all comes back to the mind. This mind that has no fixed, permanent, unchangeable qualities. It can be developed in any way that we choose. And it's infinitely flexible, and it's infinitely being non-physical, and without being and without end, it's completely, its capabilities are far beyond what we assume they are. You know, it's said that people through meditation can develop qualities of clairvoyance or remembering past lifetimes. I don't know if that's true, That's what they say. That's what they say. But if we accept that it's non-physical, we can see how it's not limited by the physical body. So maybe that's a possibility. I mean, just for example, okay, my body's here, but my mind is thinking about being in Paris, okay? So where is my mind? Is it still right here? Is it in Paris? Is it somewhere in between? You know, can we locate where this non-physical thing exists? Hard to say. Brings up a lot of interesting questions. But the fact that the mind is non-fixed, as I said, is an extremely optimistic way of looking at things. Okay, and you know, Buddhism often has the reputation of being a gloomy worldview because you know we'll start talking about death and suffering and all these things, but that's all has to be taken with the understanding that anything is possible for our minds. There is absolutely no limit to what our mind can do in the Buddhist way of looking at things. You know, most of us think we're kind of stuck with these emotions and these resentments and these memories, and we can kind of, at best, cope with them or deal with them in a more positive way. And the Buddha said it's possible to move so far beyond that. You know, you're not giving yourself credit for what's possible. Okay, we're talking about what's possible here. Yeah, so there's one other thing I wanted to say. Anyway, yeah, so it's very optimistic in that way. But you have to do the work yourself. It's you and your mind, and that's where all the good things will happen, okay? Any questions or comments at this point? Okay, we got one in the back.
Hi.
Hi.
I was wondering if you could speak to the experience of, like the way I see it is my mind, is my thoughts, my sensations, emotions. However, my awareness of those thoughts is something different. What I would call consciousness or soul is the fact that I can be aware of the thoughts themselves. So what's the distinction between that?
Yeah, that's a good question. I was going to talk about that some next week. When we're going to talk about it gets down to what does the mind do? And the Buddha says the mind perceives, or the mind is aware. So a thought that your mind perceives, like a memory, is in its qualities is no different than mind perceiving this book here, okay? It's an object that the mind perceives, okay? The mind is that, it's not the object, but it's that part of you that perceives the object. So when we have habits of anger, it means we're perceiving anger over and over again. But the object, the anger, is not part of the mind, okay? It's what the mind is perceiving. A memory is something our mind perceives or is aware of. An emotion, okay? A book, a bell, a clock, okay? They have some differences, but they're all objects of perception.
That helps.
Okay, but the mind is it's sometimes they say it's like the mind is like a blank movie screen, and we're perceiving the images that are projected upon it, okay? But we're not the images. They're not inherently part of the screen, okay? They're projected onto it, or we perceive it. If we don't like the movie that we're watching, according to the Buddha, we can change it, okay? And play something that makes us happier, okay?
Yes, that makes sense. Thank you. So basically, the thoughts aren't the mind. They're just
Yeah, they
objects of
occur
perception.
in the mind. Or they're like the clouds passing through, pretty white clouds or dark storm clouds passing through the empty sky, okay? Or they're like stars in empty space. There are all sorts of analogies that kind of talk around this thing, yeah.
Thank you.
But we think, again, we think there's a little me in here somewhere who's seeing these things. And the Buddha says that that's not accurate. It's just a blank consciousness. There's no little you in here, inside here, that's running the show. Yeah. Okay. Other questions or comments?
If anyone has a question online, just wave your hand or unmute yourself and go ahead and ask it.
Okay. I don't think we have any. Okay. So we'll wind up in just a minute. Let's go back into our meditation consciousness real quickly, and we'll just do a very quick analytic review meditation. And these are, if you get nothing else out of this whole module, these are going to be the things to remember. It's kind of the gist of the course in the first night. So set your motivation. Just a moment of concentration, meditation, mind on the breath. So to follow up on the previous conversation, the breath is the object. The mind is perceiving, is aware of the breath. Okay, they're not the exact same thing, but again, we could say while the mind is perceiving breath, mind and breath are very similar. Mind and breath are similar, but that's just the mind perceiving breath. Just to complicate things a little more. And having concentrated, we'll just do a brief review meditation of the 3 characteristics of mind as described by the Buddha. First, the mind is completely non-physical. It's dependent upon our brain, is connected to our brain and our nervous system, but it cannot be found anywhere in the body. It is a non-physical phenomena, which means it's not limited by the characteristics of physicality. Next, the mind or consciousness is without beginning and is without end. A first moment of consciousness cannot be found. A last moment of consciousness cannot be found. My consciousness does not come into existence at a certain point in time and does not go out of existence. It is not born. It does not grow old. It does not die. It is continuous. There are no gaps in consciousness. There's no moment of consciousness followed by a moment of non-consciousness, followed by another moment of consciousness. Next, the mind's nature is similar to perfectly clear light or a perfectly empty sky. It has no permanent, by which I mean unchanging, qualities. There are thoughts and emotions and feelings and ideas that occur in that space, in that empty space, but they are not the mind. They are just passing through. The mind itself is like empty space. And you can dedicate the merit from this brief meditation. I was following up on your question is when the mind perceives an object, what is the nature of the interaction between them? And that gets way beyond what we're going to be talking about in this course, but there's a lot of debate about this. You know, are they identical for that moment, or are they separate but very similar? Is the mind like a mirror that reflects the object but is not the object? So there's all sorts of obscurities you can get into there, you know, to what the nature of that. And we'll talk more about the function of the mind next week, which is to perceive. Okay, so over the next week, I'd like you to set up a meditation practice if you don't have one, which means finding a space and a time where you can sit by yourself. I'd like you to just do a brief concentration meditation like we did 6 days out of the next week for 10 minutes. Next week, we'll start looking at some of the prayers that we use here and talk about those, and we'll go into what the function of the mind is. We've talked about some of its characteristics. Now we'll talk about what it does next week. And let's see, did you talk about the readings? There are suggested readings that the FPMT has given us. They don't parallel what I'll be talking up about here. And they may seem very obscure at times, but they're interesting, okay? So they'll be available if you want to, but don't struggle with them. How do people, if you want to tell people how to get those?
Sure. Yeah, so what we're going to do this go-round of Discovering Buddhism is you can find the course materials. Let me stand up there so folks online can see. So you can find the course materials on the FPMT website. So if you go to fpmt.org, and then across the top, one of the tabs is Education. So click on Education, and hopefully I won't leave out any steps. And then find Discovering Buddhism. And that's going to take you then to the online learning center of the FPMT. And there is where you'll need to set up an account. So you'll create a username and a password on the FPMT online learning center. And from there, you can pull up Mind and Its Potential, Module 1 of Discovering Buddhism, and all of the resources for this module are there, okay? If you have any questions, you can email me. You can email me at program.linda, Linda, at kadampacenter.com. It's kadampa-center.com. .org. Oh, thank you, Chris. Program.linda at kadampa-center.org.
Yeah.
And if you have any problems with the website, the FPMT, and setting up the account, just let me know next week, and we can work through that, okay?
Yeah, for people who don't know, the FPMT, or the Foundation for the Preservation of the Mahayana Tradition, is the worldwide organization that we're affiliated with. It's about 170 centers all around the world. Some are city centers like we are, some are residential centers, and it's studying Buddhism in the Tibetan tradition. And it's a great resource. They don't support us or send us any money. Actually, we send them money. But it's a great, wonderful resources, and that gives us access to great visiting teachers who come through here via the FPMT. And the FPMT is very closely connected to His Holiness the Dalai Lama, and he includes us in his prayers every day, so that's kind of neat. Otherwise, there's no charge for events here, but if you'd like to support the center, help us keep the lights on and so on, donations in the donation box outside are always appreciated. And we have 3 more weeks, and I think we'll get through the material fine during that time. So thank you, everyone, and drive carefully. Thank you, Bobby. Thanks, Linda. Thanks, Lisa.